DJ Moore's fantasy ceiling is sky high this week as the Bears get an amazing matchup against the Jaguars' weak defense in London this Sunday. We dig into our week 6 wide receiver and tight end rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win. We are going to get into our wide receiver and tight end rankings today. We already did our running back and quarterback rankings yesterday. So if you missed that, you can go listen to it after this episode. But I mentioned it right at the top of the show. DJ Moore, baby. Like, he has such a good matchup this week against the Jaguars. And he killed it last week with 2 touchdowns, 105 yards. The Bears are finally looking like a competent offense altogether. We like DeAndre Swift as well in this matchup. But I have DJ Moore at wide receiver 5. You have him at 7. One of the best plays of the week.
Yeah, for sure. And DJ Moore coming off that big game, the revenge game, but it's not just a revenge game that's going to motivate him. He's feeling it as the number one target now for Caleb Williams. Keenan Allen has just not been good, so they don't need to worry about him on the short passing game. Rome Odunze still trying to get going here. DJ Moore has to be the go-to guy, and I think Cole Kmet has been that as well if you look at it. He's more of the big play guy, right? Throwing downfield to Kmet. He's not getting high volume. DJ Moore is the guy that you want to throw to often here because he can also make big plays after the catch. So I think that chemistry is developing pretty nicely. We know how tight it was with Justin Fields starting to be in the middle of the season with Moore and Fields. Well, I think you're really seeing that with Caleb Williams, and it pays off. Continues to pay off against a Jaguar secondary that cannot cover him.
Yeah, DJ Moore is coming through. He's getting the targets. We'll see if that continues. Hopefully, like, we like Caleb Williams this week. We want to see him though continue this progress, right? Like, if he plays against the Jaguars defense and they fall flat again, it's going to be hard to trust Caleb Williams moving forward. Now, with the other guys up at the top here, we actually have the same exact guys in our top 6 in a different order, but that's Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed disappointed a little bit last week. He had that huge play to start the game and then didn't really do anything else, but we're still plugging him right back in as a top 6 option this week. After that, though, after those top guys, we have A.J. Brown. He's coming back from the hamstring injury, and we're throwing him right back into the elite plays. I have him at wide receiver 7. You have him at 8 against Cleveland. Any worries at all with this being his first game back?
No, I mean, he has a history where that can always be aggravated or get him back on the shelf. I mean, he does seem to miss time. It seems like with soft tissue a little bit every year. Something just to have the back of your mind, but you drafted him high to play him if he's healthy. That's why you want him. And I think Jalen Hurts is going to be one happy Eagle this week. He's going to get him back. Devonta Smith is going to be back. They're off the bye. They would have fixed some things here in the Kellen Moore offense. So all those things are good. And Denzel Ward is banged up for the Browns. That's helpful. And they haven't really used Myles Garrett consistently on the pass rush. So when you have a corner out and Myles Garrett not doing what he needs to do, and this defense is struggling for Cleveland, that's great, right? I mean, it's time to throw downfield for Hurts to A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith keeps the double teams away. Dallas Goedert probably fades a little bit with these two guys back, but I love A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith this week to get right back in the flow with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get that whole like Cleveland Browns defense out of your head when you see the matchup because of how good they were last year. They're not that defense this year. They're really just not.
Not at all.
So I'm not worried about it. They're allowing the 11th most points per game to wide receivers this season. So it's not a team you have to stay away from. Terry McLaurin just had 112 yards against them last week. Brian Thomas Jr. did his thing also. And like, you can go down the list. Like they're not the same defense as prior. So A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, plug them right in with confidence. Now, going through the rest of our top 10 here, we both like Drake London. DK Metcalf is obviously an auto start every week. He's been killing it. And then wide receiver 10, you have Zay Flowers, which gets me excited because I really like Zay Flowers coming in. He finally had a big game last week. but you think it's going to continue against the Commanders. I have him at wide receiver 15, so I still really like him this week, but wide receiver 10, very high. You want to explain that thought process?
Yeah, with Lamar Jackson and Jane Daniels, you'll probably have a high scoring affair. The other
Yeah.
thing is you have to throw in the Commanders. They have very weak corners. Emmanuel Forbes is a young player. They haven't played a lot. Benjamin St. Just is still a guy that they are getting burned on the back end quite a bit. This is their biggest weakness, and they kind of have to mask it with their front seven and pressure, but the coverage is bad, and we know this offensive line for the Ravens is playing well, especially the run attack here. So Zay Flowers should have a lot of downfield success. It seems like Flowers has been the go-to guy, right? I mean, you do have tight ends that are making plays, but it's been so fickle now with Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar in the mix with Mark Andrews. It seems like it's now Flowers is the guy who's opening things up. I know other receivers did produce because Lamar was throwing like nuts in the game last week, but Zay Flowers is the man. He comes through again in this matchup, and he'll want to have a big game. I mean, I think, again, this could be a nice offensive bonanza for every player.
It really could be. I hope it's as high scoring as we think it will be. I like Brandon Ayuk a lot this week. We're kind of flip flopped on Zay Flowers and Brandon Ayuk. You have Ayuk at 15. I have him at 10. But we both like him this week.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, always in your lineups, but they also get a nice matchup against the Saints, who just let Juju Smith-Schuster do whatever on them that they wanted to do. But then next up for me here at 14 is T. Higgins. He's been getting the targets, right? He's been back in this offense. He got 2 touchdowns last week. A nice matchup against the Giants. You have him at 18. Like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins should both eat this week. This is another game that we're expecting to be a high-scoring matchup against the Giants.
Yeah, and Deontay Banks has been trying to play better for the Giants. He's their top gun corner that they like, but it's still weak on the back end. You also have Kayvon Thibodeau now in the pass rush. He's day-to-day, so a little bit more time for Joe Burrow to get the ball downfield. And, yeah, another high-scoring game, good total there. So, like, yeah, it's been the Jamar Chase big play show, but he hasn't eaten up the big volume where Higgins is seeing some nice work opposite him, and they've kind of faded these other guys, thankfully, that we don't have to see Andre Ayusvas do a lot of damage in these games. So it's going back to Chase and Higgins quite a bit. I love it.
Now let's hit on these Texans wide receivers because Nico Collins is officially placed on IR, which really stinks. Man, he was balling out, and he had to get hurt on like a 60-yard receiving touchdown. Like, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
But he's officially going to be out for 4 weeks. But this week they go to the Patriots. Stephon Diggs should get a lot of targets, right? He seems like the much safer play. He's going to get the targets, and in half PPR, like, he's safe. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1. He's not putting up a bunch of yards per reception, but he's going to be that possession receiver. Now, what about Tank Dell, though? Because he's a big play guy, and I know it hasn't come through this year, but last year we saw it happen so often. Anytime that Tank Dell had at least 5 targets in a game last year in a rookie season, he scored at least 17 fantasy points. Like, I'm fine with playing Tank Dell this week. It's risky, but I think this is the week it comes through.
Yeah, let's hope that they pivot more to Tank Dell, and like there's another way they could approach this and get more conservative, right? And go to Dalton Schultz and get him back in the mix, who's been kind of an afterthought behind the receivers when all 3 are healthy. So how do they play it? We'll see. Are the Patriots going to be giving to the big play? That's another thing we have to see. I mean, they kind of contained what we had. I know was a bad quarterback situation with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but again, they couldn't get going too much there. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think Tank Dell is one of those high risk, high reward players this week. I think you definitely could see him have 2 touchdowns, but you could also see him have very immodest game here. So when you look at it, 33 is your ranking for him, 37. So he's a borderline wide receiver 3 for both of us. And I think that's fair based on what he's done so far.
I will say I am going to move him up. He's going to be up into the 20s somewhere because I'm getting higher on him as we get going. But yeah, he's definitely risky for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but definitely I think based on the bye weeks and all those people, including Hill and Waddle and Juju, if you're trying to play him, they're all off. So you might need to extend a little bit, and he's a good player to extend to.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into the rest of our wide receiver rankings here, but we're going to take a quick break before we do that. We got wide receiver finishes to finish up our wide receiver rankings, and then also our tight end rankings in our next couple segments. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking, Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next morning. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Step 1, drink this pre-alcohol. For best results, make sure they have the Z-Biotic, your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And then step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockdown NFL to learn more and get 15% off your first purchase when you use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed by 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockdownNFL and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout for 15% off. This episode is also brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful, and it never is with Game Time. It's just the easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They always have killer deals on last-minute tickets with their best price guaranteed, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get a panorama view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You know exactly what you're going to be seeing. I just love that feature so much. It takes a matter of seconds to buy tickets, 2 taps and you're set. And they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. Their Game Time ticket coverage includes lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, 24-hour returns guarantee, and job loss assurance as well. Take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, download the Game Time app and then use code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Right at the top here, we have some differences at the top of our 20s and when we're getting into our wide receiver ranking. So I have Jameson Williams against the Cowboys as my wide receiver 21, and then Brian Thomas Jr., who's been fantastic against the Bears. So it is a harder matchup. I'm still keeping a wide receiver 22. I would have him much higher than that. If not, he's been the wide receiver 7 on the season. Now you have him lower at wide receiver 35 and 36. Is it just the matchups that are making you nervous, or is there something else?
Yeah, and keep in mind these are young receivers. Brian Thomas is a rookie. You have Jameson Williams. This is kind of his first real playing time. He's kind of a default rookie here at this point. The Cowboys do a decent job of protecting against the big plays, and I think they will get after it a little bit here up front. I don't think it's going to be a great game for Jared Goff. I mean, they're just not going to let Williams run wide open. If you don't get him running wide open, he's probably not going to have the best day. I think this is more of a methodical game plan with the running game. Hopefully, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam LaPorta will get into him. Hopefully, this will be old school Lions offense, right? That they kind of grinded away on the Cowboys. So I don't know if they're going to get the deep ball going there. That's kind of where I'm at with Williams. He needs that deep ball to happen. He's had it happen to make him really valuable here early, but if you don't get that, and Thomas, I think, is also a little bit deep ball needing here at this point. He could see the toughest coverage there out there with Jalen Johnson. So I don't expect a lot of success overall for that Jaguars passing game. So if he's not going to get free and the rush is going to get to Trevor Lawrence a little bit, it's really hard for me to feel good about it. So again, they're still playable as wide receiver 3s. That's just where I have them this week.
Yeah, I will say, like, the Bears defense has been good. Nico Collins put up a game against them, 135 yards and a touchdown. And then they faced the Rams wide receivers, which, by the way, Tutu Atwell had 82 yards. But without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, they faced the Panthers last week with Jalen Coker led, whatever. They faced the Titans in week 1. They faced the Colts with Anthony Richardson back there, not Joe Flacco. Like, they really haven't had really any competition besides Nico Collins, who they let go off. So I'm fine with Brian Thomas Jr. I do think Jameson Williams is the riskier one out of the two, but he needs one big play. So I am still okay with plugging him into my lineup. Now, the one team we don't know what to expect from, it's the Saints, right? They announced they're going to start Spencer Rattler, which makes me very excited. Nobody needs to see Jake Haener out there. But still, I don't know about Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed because Shaheed is so dependent on that one big play too, right? But Derek Carr is really good at throwing the deep ball, and he's willing to throw it. I don't know if Spencer Rattler will be willing to just chuck it up. And then Chris Olave has been, I don't know, last week, 2 receptions, 10 yards. He's been up and down this year. Who are you trusting more among these two guys, Olave or Shaheed? Because it's been Shaheed that's well outscored Olave this year.
Well, we do like to bring up coach speak, but here's some quarterback speak, and it's kind of weird and cocky that Spencer Rattler would say this, throw shade at your starter, but he said, I know one thing, we've got to get the ball to Chris Olave. That's what he said this week. So look, if you believe what the rookie says, but that's kind of a little shot at Derek Carr, which is bad. But I do think that they need to get Chris Olave involved. They're not going to be able to execute the deep ball. Spencer Rattler should just watch it and play his first game and see what we're doing here. But I don't think he's going to have deep ball success with any of these guys. I think you'll see a lot of shorter passes. That could actually help Chris Olave here playing off Alvin Kamara. You might see the tight ends get a little bit more involved as well, as you tend to see with a rookie quarterback making his first start. Will there be a Taysom Hill wrinkle? We have to see if he's even available. So this is just a lot of stuff out there, but I do think Olave should be targeted quite a bit. When you have the younger quarterbacks, the inexperienced guys, they're going to go with the shorter guys who can get open. And and that has been a source of frustration for the Saints as well. So I think they'll make it a point to get Olave involved in a favorable matchup against the Buccaneers at home.
Yeah, and we both have it ranked that way. I have Olave at wide receiver 26. You have him at 21. I think both of those rankings are fair, especially like if Rattler's going to come out and say he's going to target him, you better do it, right?
Yeah,
Shaheed's a really hard guy to trust this week. I
yeah.
have him at 34. You have him at 39. If Rattler can hit him on a long one, then of course, but it's just hard to trust that one. Now, one guy you're not trusting, you're not believing in the breakout from last week. It's Garrett Wilson. You have him down at wide receiver 23. We say down because he was wide receiver 6 last week, but that's his first even good week whatsoever, right, this season. So I do think your wide receiver 23 ranking is fine, but he did get 21 targets last week or something around there. So with that target share, I do have him up into my teens, like 17. I don't feel great about it. Talk about Garrett Wilson. Help me out here.
Yeah, we did have some actually news. We said there wasn't much affecting the Jets, but Todd Downing is now the new offensive play caller over Nathaniel Hackett. Todd Downing was with Derrick Henry. They were run heavy in Tennessee. Their passing rate of the Jets got off the rails, okay? Against the Broncos, it was a 1-point game. They were passing more than 70% of the time. Last week, they were down by a touchdown in the third quarter against the Vikings. They threw 81% of the time almost. This should not be happening. And I think you look at this matchup against the Bills have a tough pass defense. Pass coverage is tough. This should pivot a lot to a Breece Hall, Braylon Allen game plan, including them in the passing game. And I think this is also good for Tyler Conklin a little bit more. But look, Garrett Wilson is their guy, but I just don't see the passing volume and targets going his way as much because the chemistry is off. We know that. The percentage is there. So I think he could go like 7 for 75, and that would be a pretty good game for him in this particular setup. But I don't see him having like a 100-yard game again this week.
Yeah, and no wide receiver has had over 82 yards against the Bills this year, and it was Stephon Diggs in the revenge game, 6 receptions for 82 yards. That was like the best game among the wide receivers against the Bills. Nico Collins would have destroyed that last week, but got hurt, so that's kind of a little asterisk there. Now, Jalen Tolbert for the Cowboys is a guy we both love. This week. Like if I roster him, he's in my lineup for sure in this matchup. I originally started with him at wide receiver 29, right where you have him. I've been moving him up inches each like hour. I feel like he's up to a wide receiver 24 at this point for me, but we expect this to be a high scoring matchup. The Lions are allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Brandon Cooks is out. Tolbert played on 90% of the Cowboys snaps last week, got 10 targets, 87 yards, a touchdown. Like I don't see why he's not going to get 10 targets again in this great matchup. So I absolutely love him this week.
Yeah, not only is it a great matchup, it's very hard to run to Detroit, and Detroit should be playing ahead. So all that says high volume once again for Dak Prescott passing, which has been great. And Tolbert has to be a key go-to guy. I mean, the coverage is definitely going to collapse on CeeDee Lamb as much as possible because he's a very tough cover for this Lions secondary, and that's part of the reason why Lamb has been quiet in fantasy, but yapping a lot to his quarterback because look, Dak is doing what he should do. Throw to an open guy in a tougher game to win the game, right? That's what he did last week. So Dak is a smart enough quarterback to realize that. I love Tolbert this week.
Now, let me ask you a question. We already talked about Tank Dell, but if you had to choose between Tank Dell or Rome Odunze, right? We talked about how much we love DJ Moore in this matchup. Jaguars are allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, but Odunze's only had one good game, and he's not getting as many targets as we hoped for. But Odunze or Tank Dell in week 6?
Oh, that's a good question, but I think I like Odunze a little bit more. And look, I have Tank Dell a little bit ahead, but if I'm going to trust who, like Tank Dell might be ahead just because I like his floor. Like I think they're going to have to throw to him more, but I think he's a bit Jameson Williams like Odunze. You might get the big play touchdown. You might not. The Jaguars do give it up, though. We saw the balls that Joe Flacco was tossing up to Alec Pierce last week, so they can do it, but you really need that one play to come through. So if you're looking for a ceiling and you think you're in a matchup where you need one guy to put you over, you might put him in there versus going for like a safer play, let's say like a Christian Kirk in the same game or something like that, where you're like, oh, okay, I can get 6 catches for 80 from Christian Kirk, but I could maybe get 3 catches for 107 and a touchdown from Rome Odunze. Which do I want? So it's a little bit more volatile than even the plays that we talked about with Thomas and Williams for sure.
Personally, I'd go on to Tank Dell's side. I do
Yeah.
think Odunze is playable this week in this matchup,
Yeah.
but it's risky. Tank Dell's obviously also risky because he's not doing anything, but at least we saw it last year, and Nico Collins is not there. So I'm going with Tank Dell. You're going with Odunze. We'll see which one comes on top there. We're going to get into our tight end rankings here to finish up our week 5 or week 6. I keep saying week 5 because this year's flying by. Our week 6 rankings. We're going to get into tight ends right after a quick break to finish up today's show.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. If you want to get in the action, we got Thursday night game, good one here, as the 3-2 division leading Seattle Seahawks host the 49ers, who are 2-3. Then you really need this game on the road. Here, they're 3.5-point favorites now. They started as a little bit lower there, but I do actually like that number. It's also a potential for an over here with the two offenses coming in. The 49ers defense not playing all that well. The Seahawks defense has struggled here, so could be a very good fantasy game, and I do also like the 49ers to take care of that, even with the hook there at the 3.5. So that's my bet there that I would look at it at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's America's #1 sportsbook. You can get in the action for week 6. And when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets for Thursday night or anything on the Sunday or Monday slate. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Michelle, let us close the show looking at our tight end rankings. And we do have some notable dudes that are off this week, mainly Travis Kelce. That's the guy that you'll probably miss the most. I don't know if you'll miss anyone else as much as him this week, but David Njoku looks like he's hurt again. He's not going to be available, even though they are playing the Eagles. So let's start there. Who do you have at the top, and do you think Sam LaPorta can get there this week?
Yeah, I mean, I have George Kittle, Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson, Brock Bowers over Sam LaPorta, but I do like Sam LaPorta this week. And you have LaPorta at tight end 3 with just McBride and Kittle over him. He has to get going. And I feel like we're starting to see these tight ends get going, right? Like Mark Andrews finally got some targets last week. Travis Kelce is finally started to get going. Like the guys that were disappointing greatly, they're starting to get those targets like they deserve. Sam LaPorta in a high scoring matchup, he should get the targets, but it just comes down to, I feel like only Jameson Williams or Sam LaPorta can be good. It's like they can't both be good. And I also like Jameson Williams, so it's kind of hard. That's why I have him at 10 and 5 and not higher, but I do think this could be his first big game of the season. Yeah,
and last year his value, let's just say this, was very boosted by his touchdowns, and now he's not scoring. So that has been a game changer here. So get in the end zone, throw it to him, and I think this is the week. I think they warmed him up a little bit there with Goff against the Seahawks before the bye. I think this happens. I think he scores, and we're finally happy. That's why I'm at number 3. McBride, by the way, has just the best matchup of the week against the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, McBride and George Kittle are like pretty much the
Yeah.
safest guys to go. Brock Bowers had a couple down weeks, but came back to life. So you just need to keep plugging him in. I'm not scared about the Steelers matchup. Their defense looked dominant the first 3 weeks. Does not. They just don't look the same. And now they like don't have any edge rushers out of TJ Watt because everyone's injured. So that's the
Yeah.
only way they can stop anybody is by getting a sack. So Brock Bowers will be fine. Now is Tucker Kraft now an auto start after his last 2 weeks? We have them both at tight end 6. Maybe he should be higher than that because he's been absolutely amazing the last 2 weeks. But yeah, just an auto start, right? If you roster him, if you don't have McBride or Kittle or Bowers, like or Ferguson, maybe even like you're throwing in Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals have developed a reputation for being a very good defense to play tight ends against. They're actually a little bit better than you think, so don't be disappointed if he doesn't totally go off. But I still think he has a fine game this week, and he's going to be consistently involved in the offense. We'll see if Romeo Dubs can return, see if that changes the target share at all in this one. We also need the Cardinals to be somewhat competitive in this game to keep that passing volume up. Keep it by the Jordan Love has been throwing like nuts in the past couple of weeks, so we also want the volume to be high for that to
Well, we
happen.
don't
But
have to worry about that because Jordan Love will throw at least 3 interceptions. The
yeah,
Cardinals will
yeah,
score off
yeah.
of that,
So
and
he's
then
creating
Love
his
will
own
have to
volume.
throw it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. He's creating his own volume, so we
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, he definitely is. He is like that. Yeah, he's kind of like Jameis Winston in that way. It's like you're gonna
Yeah.
get the fantasy points. It just might not be pretty during it. Now you really like Evan Ingram this week if he comes back and plays in London against the Bears. I don't know how thrilled I am about playing him. We know he's
Yeah.
very volume dependent, right? He's not going to score a touchdown because he never does. But wide receiver 7's pretty, or wide receiver 7 for you. Why do you feel so good about him?
Yeah, I think they're just using this position actually, by the way. Like if you're looking for cheap 1 week rental and Evan Ingram doesn't play, Brendan Strange just seems to
Yeah.
like he's got 2 more touchdowns than Sam LaPorta this season. So they still are throwing to the tight end. I think that's maybe the bread and butter that's been missing here from Trevor Lawrence. Like he likes to throw to the middle of the field. Now Brian Thomas has expanded his horizons, literally like downfield throwing, which is great. But he doesn't want to force it to Gabe Davis. He wants his guys in there, Ingram and Kirk. So I think this is an Ingram and Kirk type of game, the old school throwing it back, if you want to throw it back 2 years to this Jaguars offense. But it's that type of game more so than a Thomas game.
We shall see there. Christian Kirk definitely is a no play because if Evan Ingram's back in that slot, like I don't want to touch Christian Kirk. I do think Brian Thomas could still have a good game even with Evan Ingram there. But yeah, if Ingram is back and he plays his full slot of snaps, he should be okay. I just worry like Brenton Strange has been kind of doing his thing. So maybe they split it until Ingram's fully healthy. I'm a little bit more nervous about playing him than you are. Another guy I don't know what to do with, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, he's not playing on enough snaps, right? 62% of snaps each of the last 2 weeks. He's like last week was prime for him. Khalil Shakir wasn't there. Like he should have been the focal point of this offense. Had 2 receptions, 34 yards. It gets the tough Jets defense, which I guess maybe you target the tight ends in that situation.
Yeah.
But still, he's not doing anything.
Yeah, I think they're just maybe too like dependent on okay, we're only going to throw to him if we can get like a 20-yard gain, right? That's okay, but like also use him more in the red zone. I mean, he did score a touchdown and a nice pass a few weeks ago with Josh Allen scrambling. He can do that. I think Joe Brady again has been a little bit off on the play calling overall, not getting his best playmakers on the field. I think they need to do that. I mean, they've not been good the past 2 weeks with Allen, so that should prompt a change, right? To get Kincaid more involved. The Jets secondary is tough, right? You can't really throw as much. You can't use it to Coleman as much in this game. So he should be a bigger factor this week. But again, you have to keep playing him because you know that game is coming. And at the very worst, I think he can get like 5 catches for 60. And that's not the worst game ever, especially in this tight end landscape. So if the tight end landscape was better, you'd feel awful about it. But right now, you're just going to roll with Kincaid and hope that they involve him more as we go
I'll
forward.
say if you're able to pick up Tucker Kraft or even Cole Kmet, like I'm playing both of those guys over Kincaid. Like
Yeah,
I'm not going
definitely.
to just keep plugging Kincaid, hoping that sooner or later they'll decide to have him on the field a ton and use him.
Yeah.
I'm fine with going with the guys who are actually scoring fantasy points over him. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you have no other options and you're like Tyler Conklin versus Kincaid, I'm just going to stick with Kincaid. You
Yeah.
know. Now Mark Andrews, he finally did something this last game. 5 targets, 4 receptions, 55 yards. Charlie Collier stole the touchdown. Isaiah Likely got a couple touchdowns. It should be coming for Mark Andrews sooner or later. He has 0 touchdowns on the season. You have him all the way down at tight end 18. I still have him at tight end 11. I think maybe I will even move him up higher than that. Like I trust Andrews more than Kincaid, and it should be a high scoring game, unlike this Jets Bills game. So I'm okay with Mark Andrews this week.
Yeah, I just think it's a game where they need to use the receivers a lot more. That's why I like Zay Flowers a lot, and
Yep.
Rashad Bateman has actually been doing some stuff. Nelson Aguilar even, but I just don't like the split between him and Likely and now Kolar in the mix.
I
I don't.
know.
It's so
He's
so.
still only played on 55% of the team snaps. He should be up like in the 70,
Yeah, like
80
I don't know.
point.
Maybe we're just seeing a pivot, right? In the way they use them, they just say we have multiple tight ends. We don't need to wear down Andrews. And what's also evident here is like they're okay with Andrews blocking. He's happy blocking, and if he puts a few blocks in there to help the running game, like he's had a good game in their eyes. They're not worried about our fantasy teams as much. So that's the thing is like let's hope. Let's hope you have him closer to where he is. I am hoping for reverse jinx at tight end 18.
Yeah, that would be great. We need better tight end play here. And then last up, I have a rank 'em question. These 3 guys, rank them in the order you want to play them. Dallas Goedert against the Browns, Pat Freiermuth against the Raiders, or Dalton Schultz against the Patriots.
Yeah, to me, it's all about Pat Freiermuth at number 9. You know how much I enjoy your Steelers tight end in fantasy. He's been really good. He scored the last 2 weeks. I like him the most here. Then I go actually with Dalton Schultz next. I think he's going to have to be used more with the Patriots. Well, Dallas Goddard back to third fiddle behind Brown and Smith.
Exactly how I have it ordered. Freiermuth just ahead of Schultz. Schultz might even have a higher, like if he could finally find the end zone, Schultz I would much prefer because of Nico Collins out. He should get more targets. He's running a ton of snaps. Actually, the second most routes run among all tight ends this year. It's just he's not scoring touchdowns. It's not been exciting. So I'll go with Freiermuth, who has been scoring touchdowns first, and then Goddard. Like you said, when both of those guys are on the field, he just doesn't really do
Yeah.
anything. That is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers will be back tomorrow talking about our favorite sleepers, our favorite DFS plays to finish up our week of shows. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.
All right.